From Software is known for making some real bangers when it comes to DLC. They feature some of the most iconic bosses and locations in their games, taking the elements of the base game and taking them to another level. So what might an Elden Ring DLC iterate and improve upon from the base game? Elden Ring featured many new mechanics and elements for FromSoft action RPGs, and I think it is ripe to further explore some of those elements in the DLC. In this video, I will discuss what I'd like to see further explored in the DLC, what I think is likely, and my biggest hopes for Elden Ring DLC. Let's get into it. First, I'd like to talk about some areas that I think they could iterate or improve upon, and the first one for me has to be the side dungeons. Side dungeons or minor dungeons have a mixed reception. The criticism of them is that they're too repetitive and too numerous, and that they don't really differentiate themselves from each other. I don't entirely agree with this. I think the side dungeons are pretty good for what they are, but I do think that the DLC could provide fewer dungeons and make them more unique. I think in areas like the Altus Plateau you can see plenty of different types of dungeons with some unique encounters and layouts, and I think in the DLC they could further explore different layouts and they could do more hero dungeons with different sort of gimmicks. And I think one thing is that they don't necessarily need bosses in all of them. I think in the main game one thing that made the side dungeons kind of repetitive were repeated bosses, and that could be eliminated by not necessarily putting a boss at the end of every dungeon, and sometimes making completing the dungeon what gives you the reward. Next, I'd like to see bosses utilizing more of the game's unique systems. Certain systems in Elden Ring are underutilized regarding bosses. You have traversal things like torrent and dedicated jumping, and you also have the stealth system, and these elements don't make their way meaningfully into many boss encounters. In previous games, bosses like the Dragon God in Demon Souls, the Ancient Wyvern in Dark Souls 3, and the Folding Screen Monkeys in Sekiro all tried their hand at traversal components in fighting a boss, and Elden Ring could utilize both torrent and jumping. Additionally, bosses like the Old Hero from Demon Souls and again the Folding Screen Monkeys in Sekiro utilized elements of stealth, and that is something Elden Ring hasn't played with but could in the DLC. And I think what this does is provide a different type of challenge that can be refreshing. Of course, they will have their intense dual boss fight, but it would be nice to see some of these ones that utilize different systems in the game and challenge you in different ways. The next item I'd like to talk about are Great Runes. Great Runes in the Elden Ring base game are more interesting conceptually than in practice. I didn't really end up using them much in my gameplay because they just didn't really matter. I think that we are likely to have more Great Runes in the DLC, and if they're going to add additional ones, I'd like to see them be more mechanically interesting. Although DLC isn't the place to totally revamp this system, which I would like to see another full iteration, I'd at least like to see new Great Runes provide more interesting bonuses. The next area I'd like to see another iteration of are open world encounters. This isn't something that the base game does badly, but I would like to see more of them. Agheel slamming down from the sky is a great moment when first playing Elden Ring. I'd love to see more open world set pieces or encounters that utilize the open world aspect of the game more. And once again, I'd like to see this test different systems. For instance, the Great Serpent from Sekiro comes to mind when imagining set pieces involving stealth and traversal. You could also have a boss or enemies that pursue you or have a longer leash out in the open world. I think that would be really cool. But there's a lot of opportunities with the traversal systems and the stealth system in the open world, and I'd like to see them further explore those and see what they can do. This next item is a comment I've heard from PvPers in the community, and that is that the crafting system in Elden Ring is cool, but it can be a pain for crafting some items. It would be nice if the DLC allowed the purchase of some of the more necessary but hard to find crafting items. I think that would be really welcome by the community, and make it easier for people doing PvP not having to grind between sessions as much. What are some areas you'd like to see From Software iterate or try out more stuff with it? Let me know in the comments. If all this talk about game design gets your creative juices flowing, you might be interested in Southern New Hampshire University, who is sponsoring this video. If you're watching this video, you enjoy the medium of video games and how they're made, and maybe you've played with the idea of developing games yourself. What if you had the knowledge and experience to create your own video games and turn it into an actual career with opportunities for growth? In the game dev program, you'll learn how to create realistic, dynamic gameplay experiences with game AI, game physics, 2D and 3D graphics, and interface design. You'll learn computer programming languages like C++, C#, and Java. And you'll learn 3D modeling and texturing with game art software. You'll learn how to research, develop, and contribute to advances and trends within the field of game programming. Courses are taught by faculty with real-world experience. Southern New Hampshire University is radically affordable. Their online tuition rates are some of the lowest in the nation. Go to snhu.edu/lorehunter, also linked in my description, to see what the current average annual salary for a programmer is and request free information about the program. When you request information, a real person will hop on a call and discuss how the program can benefit you personally. It only takes one click to find your calling. Now let's get back to the video. In this next section, I got some feedback from my community and some additions they would like to see added to the DLC of Elden Ring. From my Discord community, the idea of Torrent getting some love via some appearance options was put forth. We know there will be new fashion for the player in the DLC, but it would be nice to see the best boy get some love as well. Another suggestion from the community is to bring back the terror of mimics in the Elden Ring DLC. There are a few chests in the main game with that classic chain, teasing veteran players and giving us flashbacks of giggles and teeth from the Dark Souls games. It would be amazing for From Software to bring that threat to fruition and bring actual mimic chests into the DLC and keep us terrorized. And so in this last section, I'd like to talk about some personal hopes and dreams for Elden Ring DLC. From Software, to varying degrees, does include more content about existing characters in the world, bringing some legends out of item descriptions and into the game. With the groundwork set for characters like Mikola and Godwyn, I would be happy to see them get some more love in the DLC. I'd love to see them get more use out of the characters that George R.R. Martin helped create in the mythology of the world, and fleshing out some of these large characters in the world would be great for the DLC. It could be good for a sequel too, but I'm impatient, so I'd love to see them show up in the DLC. My next hope and dream is regarding Legacy Dungeons. We know that there will be Legacy Dungeons in the DLC, and in the main game I see two distinct kind of Legacy Dungeons in the game. First, you have Stormvale, which for me is a great example of that classic Souls level design, where the level design you unlock shortcuts, and the level masterfully winds back on itself in interesting and compelling ways, and with a dedicated jump they took that to another level in Stormvale. On the other hand, I also love how open Lanedale is, letting you run across rooftops and through sewers, utilizing the open world nature of Elden Ring on the scale of a Legacy dungeon. I'd love to see both types get a follow-up in the DLC, or perhaps a Legacy dungeon substantial enough to highlight both design approaches. And most of all, I want the bewilderment and awe of that first playthrough brought back in the DLC. Lanedale and Elfayel are some of the most jaw-dropping vistas I've seen in games, and I challenge From Software to try and top them in the DLC. I'd love to see another vista that just blows my mind. Another important aspect that I felt was integral to my first playthrough was how opening a trapped chest or going through a portal could fling you anywhere and you had no clue, and it could tease you with bits of the world coming later or throw you to the sharks in an area you're unprepared for. This sort of unexpected, unprepared nature of it really kept me on my toes and was an exciting part of my first playthrough, and I'd love to see them continue that with the DLC. So there you have it, what I would like to see iterated on, some additions to the game, and my hopes and dreams for Elden Ring DLC. Let me know in the comments what yours are, what you'd love to see iterated on, what components are realistic to add to the game to just make it that much better, and then what are your personal hopes and dreams. If you enjoy Elden Ring and From Software content, please consider subscribing to the Lore Hunter, please give this video a like, and stay tuned for more Elden Ring content and news as we learn more about the Elden Ring DLC in the future. Thanks for watching.